The room was cold, too cold for a Texas November, the kind of cold that settles in your bones and makes you think about things you'd rather forget. In the corner of the Gunter Hotel, room 214, a young man sat hunched over his guitar, his fingers trembling. Not from the cold, from something else entirely. The tape was rolling. The engineer had given the signal. But Robert Johnson wouldn't play. He just stared at the strings like they might bite him, and when he finally opened his mouth to sing, his voice carried something that made everyone in that room go quiet. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. Because Robert Johnson was about to record the song he swore would damn him forever. November 23rd, 1936, San Antonio, Texas. A makeshift recording studio that smelled of dust and old wood. This wasn't a grand concert hall. This wasn't even a proper studio. It was just a hotel room with some equipment and a man named Don Law, who believed he'd found something special. Robert Johnson had already recorded several songs that day. His fingers had danced across the fretboard with an ease that seemed almost supernatural, but this one was different. When Law suggested they try one more, Johnson shook his head. He said there was a song he'd written, a song he'd been carrying for months, a song he was afraid to sing. Law asked why. Johnson looked him dead in the eye and said, "Because once it's out there, it can't be taken back. And I don't know if I'll survive what comes after." Before we walk further down this dark road, subscribe to Soul Chronicles and hit that notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a story about the souls who touched the impossible. Leave a comment telling me which blues legend you want me to explore next, because every story here holds a secret waiting to be told. The song was called Hellhound on My Trail. And if you've ever heard it, you know it doesn't sound like other blues songs. It sounds like a confession, like a man running from something he knows will eventually catch him. The guitar work is frantic, desperate, haunted. The lyrics speak of a darkness chasing him down dusty roads, through empty fields, into sleepless nights. I got to keep moving, blues falling down like hail. Those words weren't poetry. They were a warning, a prophecy, a curse he'd written for himself. Robert Johnson was 25 years old. He'd already lived more lives than most men twice his age. Born in Mississippi, raised in poverty, shaped by loss and wandering. His music had changed dramatically in just a few short years. Those who knew him before and after spoke of it like a transformation, like he'd become someone else. The legend of the crossroads was already whispered in juke joints and on front porches. The story of how Robert Johnson met a tall man at midnight where two dirt roads crossed. How that man tuned his guitar and gave him a gift. The gift of playing better than anyone alive. But gifts from the darkness always come with a price. Whether you believe in devils or not, something happened to Robert Johnson. Something that changed not just his playing, but the way he saw the world. Friends said he became paranoid, always looking over his shoulder, always moving from town to town like something was following him. He'd wake up screaming. He'd refuse to sleep with his back to a door. And he wrote songs that seemed to come from somewhere beyond this world, songs that felt like they'd been handed to him rather than created by him. In that hotel room in San Antonio, the tape began to roll. Robert Johnson closed his eyes. His foot started tapping a rhythm that sounded like footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on a gravel road at night. Then his fingers found the strings. The guitar seemed to weep. It didn't sound like wood and wire. It sounded alive, suffering. The notes bent and twisted in ways that shouldn't have been possible on a cheap acoustic guitar. And then he started to sing. His voice cracked with genuine terror. I got to keep moving. I got to keep moving. Blues falling down like hail. And the days keep on worrying me. There's a hellhound on my trail. Don Law later said he'd never heard anything like it. The other musicians in the building stopped what they were doing. Some of them came to the door to listen. One man, a session player named Johnny Shines, who knew Robert well, stood in the hallway with tears in his eyes. He said later that he felt like he was listening to a man's soul being torn apart, that it wasn't a performance. It was something real, something Robert was living through right there in that moment. The song wasn't about a metaphorical darkness. It was about something Robert believed was actually hunting him. The recording session lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, Robert Johnson put down his guitar and walked to the window. He stared out at the San Antonio streets below, watching the people going about their ordinary lives. Lives without hellhounds, lives without curses. Don Law asked if he was all right. Robert didn't answer for a long time. Then he said something that Law never forgot. He said, "I put it on record now. That means it's permanent. That means everyone's gonna know. And once they know, there ain't no hiding from it anymore." What was Robert Johnson so afraid of? What did he think would happen once that song was released into the world? Some say he believed he was marking himself, that by recording his fear, by putting his confession on wax, he was sealing his fate. In the spiritual traditions of the Deep South, words have power. Spoken words, sung words, recorded words, even more so. To name something is to give it strength. To sing about a hellhound chasing you might just call that hellhound into existence. Think about it. Would you record a song about your own doom? Would you immortalize your greatest fear and send it out into the world? Robert Johnson did, and less than 2 years later, he was dead, poisoned at a juke joint in Mississippi, 27 years old, gone before most people even knew his name. But that recording remained. Hellhound on My Trail survived. And it's been chasing listeners ever since, making them feel that same cold dread Robert felt in that hotel room, making them wonder what kind of man could create something so terrifyingly real. The session in San Antonio produced some of Robert Johnson's most famous recordings: Crossroad Blues, Love in Vain, Stones in My Pathway. But Hellhound on My Trail stands apart. Music historians call it one of the most important blues recordings ever made, not because of technical perfection, but because of raw, unfiltered emotion. Because you can hear in Robert's voice that he's not acting, he's not putting on a show, he's genuinely afraid. And that fear translated through the scratchy recording quality, through the decades, through every format that song has ever been played on. Vinyl, tape, CD, digital streams, the fear remains. There's a story that Robert Johnson tried to destroy the recording, that after the session ended, he asked Don Law to let him have the master. Law refused. He knew what he had. He knew it was extraordinary. Robert reportedly offered money he didn't have, begged, said it was a mistake, that the song should never be heard. Law thought he was just being superstitious. He didn't understand that for Robert this wasn't superstition, it was survival. And when Law said no, Robert walked out of that hotel, and some say he was never quite the same again. More withdrawn, more desperate, more convinced that his time was running out. In the folklore of the blues, certain songs are believed to carry weight beyond entertainment. They're vessels, carriers of truth, of pain, of spiritual power. Musicians were careful about what they sang and how they sang it, because once you put real soul into a song, once you bleed into the music, it becomes more than sound. It becomes a piece of you that exists independently, walking around in the world, touching people you'll never meet, outliving you by generations. Robert Johnson understood this better than most. He knew that Hellhound on My Trail wasn't just a song. It was a part of him he could never take back. Listen to the recording today, and you'll hear things that don't make sense. Background sounds that seem out of place, a door creaking when no door should be opening, footsteps that aren't Robert's foot keeping time, whispers in the empty spaces between verses. Audio engineers have analyzed the track for decades. Some dismiss these as recording artifacts, imperfections in the primitive equipment. Others aren't so sure. They point to frequencies that shouldn't exist, to patterns in the noise that sound almost like words, to the way the recording makes people feel physically uncomfortable in a way other songs from that era don't. There's a famous story among blues collectors, a tale that gets passed around in hushed tones at record shows and music forums. about a man who bought an original 78 RPM pressing of Hellhound on My Trail in the 1950s. He took it home, played it late at night on his phonograph, and according to those who knew him, he became obsessed, played it over and over. Started hearing things in the song that weren't there before. Started seeing things in his house, shadows moving wrong. His dog refusing to enter certain rooms. Within a month, he'd given the record away. Within 6 months, he'd moved to a different state. He never spoke about what happened, but he never listened to blues music again. Coincidence? Probably. The human mind is powerful. It can convince us of anything if we're scared enough, if we believe strongly enough. But then again, dozens of people who've owned that particular recording have reported similar experiences. A feeling of being watched, dreams of dusty crossroads and figures in black hats. A sense that something's waiting just outside their peripheral vision, just outside their understanding. The record itself seems to carry something, an imprint, an echo of whatever Robert Johnson was feeling that day in San Antonio when he sang about running from something he knew he couldn't escape. What made Robert Johnson call Hellhound on My Trail a curse? Was it the content of the song itself, the dark imagery and confessional lyrics? Was it the act of recording it, of making his fear permanent and public? Or was it something that happened during the session? Something nobody talked about. Don Law's notes from that day are incomplete. There's a gap in the timeline. A period of almost an hour between takes that's unaccounted for. What happened in that hour? What did Robert experience? What did he see or hear or feel that made him so desperate to destroy what he'd just created? Some researchers believe Robert had a breakdown during the session, that the emotional weight of performing that song, of really living through those lyrics, broke something inside him. Others think he had a vision, a premonition of his own death, that while singing about the Hellhound, he saw how his story would end, poisoned by a jealous husband, dying slowly, painfully, in a small Mississippi cabin while the people around him prayed and wept. Dying young and unknown, with most of his music unheard. Maybe that's what he saw. Maybe that's why he called it a curse. But here's what we know for certain. After recording Hellhound on My Trail, Robert Johnson's behavior changed. Friends noticed, family noticed. He became more reckless, drinking harder, staying out later, taking more risks with other men's wives, which in the Jim Crow South was playing with death itself. It was like he'd stopped caring, like he'd accepted something inevitable. Like a man who knows exactly when and how he's going to die and decides to live every last second as fully as possible. Consequences be damned. Was this the curse at work? A self-fulfilling prophecy? Or just a young man's tragic choices catching up with him? The last confirmed photograph of Robert Johnson shows a man who looks older than 27. His eyes are tired. There's a sadness in his expression that goes beyond normal melancholy. Some people who've studied that photograph closely say there's something else there too. A resignation, an acceptance, like he's already halfway to wherever he's going next. That photograph was taken not long after the San Antonio sessions, not long after he recorded the song he called a curse. The timing might mean nothing, or it might mean everything. On August 13th, 1938, less than 2 years after recording Hellhound on My Trail, Robert Johnson drank whiskey laced with poison at a juke joint near Greenwood, Mississippi. The details are murky. The official story is that a jealous husband did it. But there are other versions, darker versions, stories about Robert refusing to play certain songs that night. About him acting paranoid, looking at the door like he was expecting someone. About him saying, just before he drank that fatal whiskey, "I guess it's time." Like he knew, like he'd known all along, like the Hellhound had finally caught up. He died 3 days later, in agony, crawling on his hands and knees, barking like a dog, according to witnesses, barking, like something had gotten inside him, like the Hellhound wasn't chasing him anymore. It had caught him, and in his final moments, Robert Johnson became the very thing he'd been running from. Whether you believe that's literal or symbolic or just the cruel ravings of a poisoned mind doesn't matter. What matters is that Robert believed it, and that belief shaped his final days, his final hours, his final terrible moments on this earth. Hellhound on My Trail was released commercially in 1937. It didn't sell well initially. Most people had never heard of Robert Johnson. The song was too raw, too uncomfortable, too real for mainstream audiences. But musicians heard it, blues players heard it, and they understood immediately that they were listening to something unprecedented, something that transcended technique or style. They were hearing truth, unvarnished, terrifying truth. The truth of a man who knew he was marked, who knew his time was short, who tried to warn us through 6 strings and a voice that cracked with genuine fear. Decades later, when the blues revival brought Robert Johnson's music to new generations, Hellhound on My Trail became legendary. Rock musicians covered it, scholars analyzed it. It appeared in films and documentaries. It was added to the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. But here's the question nobody asks. At what cost? Robert didn't want that song released. He tried to destroy it. He called it a curse. And now millions of people have heard it, carried it with them, let those haunted notes and terrified lyrics into their lives. Did we honor Robert Johnson by preserving his work? Or did we perpetuate the very curse he tried to stop? There's a theory among certain blues historians, a dark theory that they hesitate to speak about in academic settings. The theory goes like this. Robert Johnson didn't just write a song about a hellhound. He created a vessel, a container for something he'd experienced, something he'd encountered at that crossroads, or in his nightmares, or in the deepest parts of his soul. And by recording it, by giving it form and permanence, he released it into the world. Now it lives in that recording, waiting, listening, touching everyone who truly hears it. Not everyone. Most people can listen to Hellhound on My Trail and just hear an old blues song. But some people, the ones who are open or vulnerable or mark themselves somehow, they hear more, they feel more. And sometimes, late at night when they're alone, they wonder if something's following them too. Would you want to hear a song like that? A song that might carry a curse? A song that its creator feared? Most of us would say yes out of curiosity, out of a belief that we're immune, that we're too rational, too modern, too protected by distance and time. But Robert Johnson was there, in that room, feeling whatever he felt, seeing whatever he saw. And he was terrified, not of the song failing, not of criticism or rejection, but of the song succeeding, of it spreading, of it touching people and places he'd never reach, of it outliving him and continuing to work whatever dark purpose he believed it served. The final recording of Hellhound on My Trail runs 2 minutes and 52 seconds, less than 3 minutes of music. But in those 3 minutes, Robert Johnson poured out something that still resonates nearly 90 years later. You can hear his fingers sliding on the strings, the creak of the guitar, the room tone of that hotel. And underneath it all, you can hear the fear. Not performed fear, not artistic fear, real fear. The kind that makes your hands shake and your voice break. The kind that knows something terrible is true and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Some nights, in quiet places, musicians still play Hellhound on My Trail. They play it in tribute, in respect, in fascination. And sometimes, if the night is dark enough and the player is skilled enough and the moment is right, something happens. The song takes on a life of its own. The notes fall differently. The rhythm shifts. And for just a moment, it feels like Robert Johnson is there. Still running, still afraid, still trying to outrun the thing that's chasing him. Still warning anyone who'll listen that some roads, once walked, can never be unwalked. Some songs, once sung, can never be unsung. Some curses, once spoken, can never be unspoken. So was Hellhound on My Trail really a curse? Did Robert Johnson trap something dark and powerful in that recording? Or was it just a brilliant, troubled young man creating art from his deepest fears and superstitions? We'll never know for certain. Robert took that truth with him when the hellhound finally caught up. All we have is the recording, the evidence, the artifact, and our own reaction when we listen to it. When we hear that anguished voice singing about running, always running, knowing the chase is almost over, knowing that no matter how fast you go, no matter how far you travel, some things are patient, some things are persistent, some things are inevitable. Maybe the real curse wasn't in the song itself. Maybe it was in the knowing. Robert Johnson knew his fate. He saw it coming. He tried to warn people. He tried to stop the recording from being released, but nobody listened. Nobody understood. And so the song went out into the world, carrying his warning, carrying his fear, carrying whatever darkness he'd encountered along those dusty Mississippi roads, carrying it forward through time, generation after generation, listener after listener, a perpetual motion machine of dread, a time capsule of terror, a curse in musical form that can never be broken because it's pressed into wax, stored in digital files, played on streaming services, permanent, eternal, just like Robert feared it would be. The Gunter Hotel still stands in San Antonio. Room 214 is there, though it's been renovated countless times. The hotel doesn't advertise its blues history much, maybe because too many people have asked to stay in that room specifically, maybe because some of those people have reported strange experiences, trouble sleeping, vivid dreams about crossroads and dark figures, the sound of guitar strings being tuned in the middle of the night. Or maybe the hotel just doesn't want to encourage the mythology, doesn't want to feed the legend, doesn't want to admit that something happened in that room that went beyond music, something that left a mark. Robert Johnson recorded 29 songs in his lifetime. Most of them are masterpieces, songs that defined the blues and influenced rock and roll, jazz, soul, everything that came after. But Hellhound on My Trail is different. It's the one that sounds like a door opening, like a veil being pulled back, like reality splitting just enough to let something through. And once that door is open, once that veil is moved, once that reality is split, can it ever be fully closed again? Robert didn't think so. That's why he called it a curse. That's why he tried to stop it. That's why, according to people who were there, he never played it live again after recording it, never sang those words on stage, never let that darkness out, except for that one time. That one permanent, irreversible time. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the entire story is this. Robert Johnson's most famous song, the one everyone knows, is Crossroad Blues. It's about the deal, the meeting, the transaction. But Hellhound on My Trail is about the aftermath. The consequences, the price being collected, they're two parts of the same story. And if you believe in the Crossroads legend, if you believe Robert met someone or something at that midnight intersection, then Hellhound on My Trail isn't fiction. It's a documentary. It's Robert's attempt to explain what it feels like to owe a debt you can never repay, to be marked for collection, to know that every day brings you closer to the settling of accounts. Think about recording that. Think about sitting in a room, putting that experience into words and music, performing it for strangers, knowing it will outlive you, knowing that people will listen to it long after you're gone and wonder if it's true, knowing that you're creating your own epitaph, your own ghost story, your own warning to future generations. That takes courage, or desperation, or both. Robert Johnson had both, and so he sang. He sang about the hellhound on his trail. He sang about keeping moving. He sang about fear and flight and the terrible certainty of being hunted. He sang his truth, and it became our nightmare. In the end, maybe that's what curses really are. Truths so powerful, so frightening, so fundamentally disturbing that they change everyone who encounters them. They spread like disease, like fire, like gospel. They burrow into your mind and make you question what you thought you knew about the world. Hellhound on My Trail does that. It makes you wonder. It makes you listen to the darkness differently. It makes you think about roads not taken and deals not made and the things that might be following you that you've simply refused to acknowledge. It makes you understand, just for a moment, what Robert Johnson felt. And that understanding is the curse, because once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. Once you hear it, really hear it, you can't unhear it. Robert Johnson died at 27. The hellhound caught him, but his music survived. And in surviving, it spread. It infected, it transformed, it cursed, if you believe in such things. Every guitarist who learned his licks, every singer who tried to match his phrasing, every listener who felt their skin crawl at that desperate, hunted voice. All of them touched by the same thing that touched Robert in that hotel room in San Antonio. All of them carrying a piece of the curse forward, making it stronger, making it permanent, making it immortal. So what do you believe? Was Hellhound on My Trail just a song, a piece of musical history, or was it something more, something darker, something that Robert Johnson released into the world despite his fear, or perhaps because of it? Something that's still out there, still playing, still hunting, still claiming pieces of everyone who truly listens? The answer doesn't matter, not really. Because whether the curse is real or imagined, Robert Johnson believed it. And his belief made it real enough to shape his art, his life, his death. Made it real enough to echo through 90 years. Made it real enough to make us wonder. Made it real enough to make us afraid. That fear, that wonder, that's what Robert left us. Not just music, but a question. A terrible, beautiful question. What would you sacrifice for greatness? And once you've sacrificed it, once the deal is done, can you ever escape the consequences? Or is there always something following? Always something waiting? Always a hellhound on your trail? Perhaps the true curse of Robert Johnson's recording isn't supernatural. Perhaps it's simply this: everyone who hears it, really hears it, is forced to confront their own mortality, their own fears, their own dark roads and crossroads decisions. The song holds up a mirror, and in that mirror we see ourselves running from something, maybe failure, maybe success, maybe our own potential, maybe our own darkness. And in that moment of recognition, we understand what Robert understood, that we're all being chased by something, that we're all trying to keep moving, that we all have hellhounds on our trails. His was just more honest about it. More real, more immediate, more willing to sing the truth that the rest of us whisper only in our darkest moments. Robert Johnson walked into the Gunter Hotel as a young blues musician trying to make a name for himself. He walked out as something else, a vessel, a warning, a legend in the making. And the song he recorded that day, the song he feared, the song he called a curse, became his most enduring legacy. Not Crossroad Blues, not Love in Vain, but Hellhound on My Trail. The confession, the prophecy, the curse, the truth. And the recording plays on, in libraries and archives, on streaming services and vinyl reissues, in documentaries and tribute albums. It plays on, the Hellhound still running, Robert still singing, the curse still spreading, one listener at a time, one generation after another, forever and always, as permanent as Robert feared it would be, as powerful as he knew it was, as dangerous as he tried to warn us. The tape is still rolling, the hellhound is still coming, and Robert Johnson is still running somewhere in those grooves, in those notes, in that terrified voice that echoes across time. Still running, still warning, still cursed. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Keep moving, keep singing, keep running, and hope that whatever's chasing us never quite catches up. But it always does. Eventually, it always does. If this story sent chills down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe to Soul Chronicles, because here, every soul has a song to be told, and some of those songs will haunt you forever, just like they haunted the men who sang them, just like they were meant to.